poor girl showed up covered in mud at the job interview, and the millionaire CEO chose her. There are moments in life when everything seems to be working against you. For 26-year-old Emma Carter, this was one of those days. The sky had opened up that morning, turning the streets into muddy rivers just as her car decided to break down 3 miles from the most important job interview of her life. Emma stood at the side of the road, rain pelting her carefully selected outfit, watching as passing cars sprayed her with dirty water. She checked her watch 45 minutes until her interview at Horizon Industries, one of the most prestigious tech companies in the city. The CEO himself, billionaire Richard Morgan, was rumored to be sitting in on this round of interviews. She had a choice: miss the interview she'd spent weeks preparing for, or walk. With determination in her eyes, Emma began to march through the downpour. By the time she arrived at the gleaming Horizon Industries headquarters, Emma was a sight to behold. Her once white blouse was now splattered with mud, her hair plastered to her face, and her portfolio, thankfully protected in a waterproof case, was the only thing that had survived the journey intact. The receptionist's eyes widened as Emma approached the desk, leaving small puddles in her wake. I'm here for the marketing strategist interview," Emma said, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity despite her appearance. "Miss Carter?" the receptionist asked, checking her computer. "You're actually right on time. Let me call someone to assist you." Emma expected to be shown to a bathroom, where she could attempt to salvage her appearance. Instead, she was escorted directly to the waiting area where 5 other candidates sat in pristine business attire, their expressions a mixture of shock and poorly concealed amusement at her disheveled state. Minutes ticked by in uncomfortable silence. Emma fought back tears of embarrassment, knowing her chances were ruined. She had worked so hard to get this interview, putting herself through college while caring for her ailing mother, taking night classes to earn her MBA, and spending years building her portfolio with freelance work. "Emma Carter?" a voice called from the doorway. She looked up to see a woman in a tailored suit holding a tablet. "That's me," Emma replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Mr. Morgan will see you first," the woman said. The other candidates exchanged confused glances. Emma was equally surprised, but rose to follow the assistant down a long hallway to an imposing set of double doors. The assistant paused before opening them. "Just so you know, Mr. Morgan can be unconventional. Good luck." Emma stepped into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Standing at the window was Richard Morgan himself, tall, impeccably dressed, and known for building Horizon Industries from nothing into a multi-billion-dollar company in just under a decade. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable, as he took in her mud-splattered appearance. "Miss Carter," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Please have a seat." Emma hesitated. "Mr. Morgan, I should explain my appearance." "No need," he interrupted, sitting down across from her. "My assistant already informed me about your car breaking down 3 miles from here." Emma blinked in surprise. "How did you?" "Traffic cameras," he said simply. "We keep an eye on all candidates as they approach our building. Security purposes." He leaned forward, studying her with intensity. "What interests me is that when faced with a significant obstacle, you chose to walk through a thunderstorm rather than call to reschedule." Emma straightened in her chair, mud squelching slightly. "I don't believe in excuses, Mr. Morgan. When I commit to something, I follow through, regardless of the circumstances." A small smile appeared on his face. "Tell me, Miss Carter, why do you want to work for Horizon Industries?" For the next 30 minutes, Emma forgot about her appearance as she outlined her vision for expanding Horizon's market reach, demonstrating her knowledge of their products and competitors. Throughout her presentation, Richard Morgan remained silent, watching her with calculating eyes. When she finished, he stood abruptly. "Thank you for your time, Miss Carter. My assistant will show." "One more thing," he said, reaching into his desk drawer. He withdrew a small black box and slid it across the desk toward her. "Open it." Confused, Emma lifted the lid to find a key card with the Horizon Industries logo. "I don't understand." "That's your new access card. You start Monday as our new Director of Marketing Strategy." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "But the other candidates? Don't you need to interview them?" Morgan shook his head. "I've been watching the approach of all 6 candidates this morning. The others arrived early, sat in their cars until precisely 10 minutes before their scheduled time, then walked in without a drop of rain on them despite the downpour." He gestured to her mud-covered form. "You're the only one who demonstrated the kind of determination and resilience I want in my executive team." "Executive team?" Emma repeated, stunned. "But the position I applied for was junior marketing strategist. I'm not interested in hiring someone who just meets the minimum requirements, Miss Carter. I'm looking for someone who exceeds expectations even in the worst circumstances." He extended his hand. "The starting salary is $250,000 annually, with performance bonuses and stock options. Will that be acceptable?" Emma felt dizzy. The payment, more money than she had ever imagined earning, would change everything. Her mother's medical bills, her student loans, all of it could be handled. She grasped his hand firmly, mud and all. "Yes, Mr. Morgan. That will be acceptable." As Emma left the building, access card clutched tightly in her hand, the rain had stopped and sunlight was breaking through the clouds. She couldn't help but laugh at the cosmic timing. What she didn't know then was that Richard Morgan had recognized something in her that day, the same fierce determination that had propelled him from poverty to prosperity. He wasn't just hiring a marketing director, he was finding a successor. 5 years later, Emma Carter would become the youngest CEO in Horizon Industries history when Richard Morgan stepped down to focus on his philanthropic endeavors. Under her leadership, the company's value would triple, and her story, beginning with that muddy interview, would become corporate legend. But that morning, as she called her mother with the news, all Emma knew was that sometimes, when everything seems to be going wrong, you're actually being guided toward something extraordinary. The payment for her perseverance was just the beginning of a remarkable journey. The world watches what you do when things go according to plan. But your character is revealed by what you do when everything falls apart. Emma Carter's story reminds us that sometimes, the biggest opportunities arrive disguised as disasters. All we need is the courage to keep moving forward, one muddy step at a time. Behind every success story is a moment when someone chose not to give up. For Emma, that moment came on a rainy morning when she decided that her dreams were worth fighting for, no matter how messy the journey might be. Life rarely offers us perfect circumstances to prove our worth. So the next time you find yourself caught in a storm, literally or figuratively, remember Emma Carter and her muddy interview. Remember that how you handle your worst days may lead to your best opportunities. The payment for perseverance isn't just financial success, it's becoming the kind of person who can weather any storm. The morning of Emma's first day at Horizon Industries arrived with clear skies, a stark contrast to the storm that had led to her unconventional hiring. As she approached the gleaming headquarters, this time in a pristine charcoal suit, and with her portfolio tucked neatly under her arm, she couldn't help but feel like an imposter. Would the other employees respect someone who had seemingly bypassed the traditional hiring process. What if Richard Morgan's faith in her was misplaced? The payment of self-doubt was weighing heavily on her shoulders as she swiped her access card at the executive elevator. "Good morning, Miss Carter," the receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "Mr. Morgan asked me to direct you straight to the conference room on the 40th floor. The executive team is waiting." Emma's stomach tightened. She had expected an orientation, perhaps a tour of the facilities, not an immediate plunge into executive meetings. Nevertheless, she maintained her composure as she rode the elevator, mentally reviewing everything she knew about Horizon's recent projects. The conference room doors opened to reveal 10 pairs of eyes staring at her with undisguised curiosity. Richard Morgan stood at the head of the table, his expression as unreadable as it had been during their interview. "Team, this is Emma Carter, our new Director of Marketing Strategy," he announced without preamble. "And as of this morning, she's facing her first challenge." Emma felt her breath catch as Morgan continued, "Our largest competitor, Nova Tech, has just announced a product launch that directly threatens our market position. Their press conference is scheduled for 5 p.m. today. By 9 a.m. tomorrow, I want a comprehensive counter-strategy on my desk." He turned to Emma. "You have the full resources of the marketing department at your disposal. Show me I made the right decision." With that, Morgan left the room, leaving Emma standing before a team of executives who looked skeptical at best, hostile at worst. An older man in an expensive suit, Emma would later learn he was Douglas Wells, CFO, and Morgan's oldest friend, was the first to speak. "Well, Miss Mud Girl, looks like Richard has thrown you into the deep end," he said with a thin smile. "Let's see if you sink or swim." Emma straightened her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "I assume you have the details of Nova's announcement." Wells slid a tablet across the table. "What we know so far. They've been developing in secret for months." As Emma reviewed the information, her mind was already racing. Nova was launching a direct competitor to Horizon's flagship product, but with features Horizon had deemed too expensive to implement. If successful, it could erode Horizon's market share by as much as 30% within months. "I'll need access to R&D files, current marketing plans, and a meeting with the product development team," she said, looking up from the tablet. "All that in one day?" A woman who introduced herself as Veronica Chen, VP of Operations, asked skeptically. "If necessary," Emma replied simply. What followed was the most intense 12 hours of Emma's professional life. She assembled a team of marketing analysts, designers, and strategists, many of whom were initially resistant to taking direction from the newcomer, who'd been hired under unusual circumstances. The story of her muddy interview had spread throughout the company like wildfire. Instead of attempting to assert authority she hadn't yet earned, Emma took a collaborative approach. "I don't have all the answers," she told the assembled team. "But together, we might find solutions no individual could conceive alone." By mid-afternoon, Nova's press release leaked online, giving Emma's team additional details to work with. While others might have panicked at this new information, Emma saw opportunity. Nova's product had one significant weakness, a vulnerability Emma spotted only because of her unusual background combining marketing with product engineering. At 8:30 p.m., long after most employees had gone home, Emma was still in the conference room with her core team, finalizing their strategy. The room was littered with coffee cups and takeout containers, physical evidence of the mental marathon they'd run together. "This isn't just about countering Nova's launch," Emma explained as they reviewed their plan. "It's about changing the conversation entirely. Instead of merely responding to Nova's challenge, Emma proposed a bold move, announcing an accelerated timeline for Horizon's next-generation product. Highlighting features that would make Nova's innovation seem obsolete before it even hit the market. Additionally, she recommended a limited-time trade-in program for customers who might be tempted by Nova's offering. The payment we'd incur from the trade-in program would be substantial initially, she acknowledged, addressing the finance team's concerns. But the long-term customer loyalty and market perception would more than compensate. At 8:45 a.m. the next morning, 15 minutes ahead of deadline, Emma placed a comprehensive 30-page strategy document on Richard Morgan's desk. She hadn't gone home all night, and the only evidence of her exhaustion was a slight redness in her eyes. Morgan looked up from his computer, studying her for a long moment. "You know I set an impossible task, right?" Emma nodded. "Yes, sir." Most new executives would have produced something hasty and defensive, or requested an extension. He tapped the document. "Why didn't you?" "The same reason I walked through the rain to my interview," Emma replied. "I don't believe in letting circumstances dictate my performance." Morgan allowed himself a small smile. "And your team? I understand you had the marketing department working until midnight." "They volunteered to stay," Emma said with quiet pride. "Once they caught the vision of what we could accomplish, everyone wanted to be part of it." Richard Morgan leaned back in his chair. "Miss Carter, do you know why I started Horizon Industries?" The question caught Emma by surprise. "To revolutionize how technology integrates with daily life, according to your company mission statement," she answered. "That's the public version," Morgan said, standing to look out his window at the city below. "The truth is, I started this company because I was angry." He turned back to face her. "I grew up poorer than most people can imagine. My mother cleaned houses, including the mansion of Gerald Nova, founder of Nova Tech. As a child, I sometimes accompanied her to work during school breaks. One day, Mr. Nova caught me reading books in his library instead of sitting quietly in the kitchen, as instructed." Morgan's expression darkened at the memory. "He told my mother that perhaps if she spent more time teaching me my place, and less time letting me dream above my station, she wouldn't be scrubbing his floors for pennies. He fired her on the spot." Emma remained silent, sensing the weight of this personal history. "The payment for that humiliation," Morgan continued, "was my lifelong determination to build something that would eclipse Nova's legacy. And I have. But Gerald's son Jeffrey runs the company now, and he's smarter than his father. This product launch is personal for him, a direct challenge to me." He picked up Emma's strategy document. "Which is why your approach is perfect. Jeffrey expects me to react emotionally, to rush something to market defensively. He doesn't expect us to leapfrog them entirely." For the first time, Emma saw genuine warmth in Richard Morgan's eyes. "You passed the test, Miss Carter. Not just with your strategy, but with how you led your team. Leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about bringing out the best in the people around you. That's something I can't teach." Emma felt a profound sense of validation, but also curiosity. Was there really a Nova Tech announcement, or was this entire scenario fabricated to test me? Morgan's enigmatic smile returned. "Let's just say Jeffrey Nova is going to be very surprised by our press conference this afternoon." He extended his hand. "Welcome to the real executive team, Emma. The payment for excellence around here is greater responsibility. I hope you're ready." As Emma shook his hand, she realized that her life had fundamentally changed in just 24 hours. The muddy girl, who had walked miles in the rain for a chance at a junior position, was now standing in the CEO's office as a respected executive, having earned her place through grit and intelligence. What she couldn't know then was that this was just the first of many challenges Richard Morgan would set before her, each one designed not merely to test her abilities, but to prepare her for a future role he had already envisioned for her. The payment for each success would be greater challenges, greater responsibilities, and ultimately, greater rewards. Outside Morgan's office, Douglas Wells was waiting, his earlier skepticism replaced with grudging respect. Impressive work, Carter. Few people earn Richard's trust so quickly. Thank you, Mr. Wells, Emma replied. Though I suspect this is just the beginning. Wells nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. Indeed it is. The subject line read simply, Horizon's 5-year vision. Emma had arrived at Horizon Industries hoping to secure a stable job with good pay. Now, it seemed, she had found something far more valuable, a mentor who saw in her the same relentless drive that had propelled him from poverty to prosperity. The payment for her perseverance was not just financial security, but the opportunity to make a lasting impact on an industry. As news of Emma's successful strategy spread throughout the company, the whispers changed from skepticism about the mud girl to respect for Morgan's protege. She had earned her place at the table not through connections or credentials, but through pure determination and brilliance under pressure. That evening, as Emma sat across from Richard Morgan at an upscale restaurant with a view of the city they were both working to transform, she realized that sometimes the most difficult journeys lead to the most rewarding destinations. The payment for her courage on that rainy day was beyond anything she could have imagined, and this was just the beginning of her story. The dinner with Richard Morgan stretched late into the evening, their conversation flowing from immediate business concerns to long-term visions for Horizon Industries. Emma listened intently as Morgan outlined his plans for the company's expansion into emerging markets, technological innovations that were still in the conceptual stage, and his philosophy on building a corporate culture that valued innovation over tradition. The payment that most companies demand is conformity, Morgan said, swirling the remnants of wine in his glass. They hire brilliant minds and then force them into rigid systems that stifle creativity. I built Horizon to be different. As their dinner concluded, Morgan handed Emma a small USB drive. Tomorrow's press conference will put a target on our backs. Jeffrey Nova won't take our counter-strategy lightly. This drive contains information about Nova Tech that isn't publicly available, their financial vulnerabilities, internal conflicts, projects they've abandoned. Consider it your insurance policy. Emma hesitated before accepting the drive. How did you obtain this information? Morgan's expression remained neutral. Let's just say that when Gerald Nova fired my mother, she wasn't the only disgruntled employee who left with stories to tell. For the first time since meeting him, Emma felt a flicker of unease about Richard Morgan's methods. She slipped the drive into her purse without comment, but the weight of it seemed to grow heavier as the evening progressed. The next morning, Horizon's press conference went exactly as planned. Emma stood slightly behind Morgan as he announced the accelerated timeline for their next-generation product, watching with satisfaction as financial analysts' phones lit up with notifications about Nova Tech's plummeting stock price. The payment for their strategic masterstroke was immediate and measurable. By closing bell, Horizon stock had climbed 12% while Nova's had fallen nearly 20%. What Emma hadn't anticipated was the personal call that came to her office phone later that afternoon. Miss Carter, a smooth male voice said when she answered. Jeffrey Nova here. I believe congratulations are in order. Emma's grip tightened on the receiver. Mr. Nova, I'm surprised to hear from you. Are you? I make it a point to know my opponents, especially the unexpected ones. You've made quite an impression in your first days at Horizon. I'm just doing my job, Emma replied carefully. Nova's chuckle was soft but held no warmth. We both know that's not true. Richard doesn't hire people to just do their jobs. He collects individuals who share his particular brand of ruthlessness. I'm curious which category you fall into, true believer or opportunist. I believe in Horizon's mission and leadership, Emma said firmly. As did Patricia Chen, before she discovered what Richard was really capable of, Nova replied. Ask him about her sometime. The payment for loyalty at Horizon can be quite steep, Miss Carter. I'd hate to see another promising career destroyed. Before Emma could respond, the line went dead. She sat motionless at her desk, the USB drive from Morgan suddenly feeling like a live grenade in her drawer. When she searched for information about Patricia Chen online, she found surprisingly little, only that she had been Morgan's director of operations about 5 years ago before leaving the company abruptly. All traces of her professional life seemed to vanish after her departure from Horizon. Emma debated whether to mention the call to Morgan, ultimately deciding against it. Instead, she threw herself into implementing their counter-strategy, working closely with the team she'd assembled during their overnight session. The camaraderie that had formed during that intense collaboration continued to grow, giving Emma a solid foundation within the company hierarchy. 3 weeks later, Emma's loyalty to Morgan was tested again when Douglas Wells requested a private meeting. The CFO closed his office door before speaking in hushed tones. Richard is impressed with you, he began, which means you're now part of the inner circle. The payment for that privilege is knowledge you can't unlearn. He slid a folder across his desk. The Nova Tech product launch wasn't a coincidence. We had an insider feeding us information, an engineer named Marcus Lee, who believed he deserved recognition Nova wouldn't give him. Richard authorized a significant payment to secure his cooperation. Emma felt her chest tighten. Are you saying we engaged in corporate espionage? Wells leaned back in his chair. I'm saying that Richard Morgan plays a longer game than most people realize. Marcus approached us 6 months ago, and Richard has been planning this counter-move since then, waiting for the perfect moment and the perfect person to execute it. Me, Emma said quietly. You, Wells confirmed. Richard needed someone with no history at Horizon, someone whose strategy couldn't be traced back to insider information. Your mud-covered entrance was serendipitous timing. Emma felt as though the floor beneath her had shifted. Why are you telling me this? Because Richard sees you as his protege, possibly even his successor, Wells replied, his expression grave. But I've known him for 20 years. The payment for his mentorship is unwavering loyalty, even when his methods cross into gray areas. I need to know if you're prepared for that. Emma left Wells' office with her thoughts in turmoil. Everything she had achieved at Horizon suddenly felt tainted by manipulation. Had her hiring been genuine recognition of her talents, or merely convenient timing for Morgan's scheme? That evening, as she worked late in her office, Richard Morgan appeared in her doorway. Douglas spoke to you, he said. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded, maintaining her composure despite her internal conflict. He did. Morgan entered and closed the door behind him. And now you're questioning everything about your position here. Wouldn't you? Emma countered. To her surprise, Morgan smiled. That's precisely why I wanted Wells to tell you. If you had accepted the information without question, you wouldn't be the person I think you are. He sat down across from her. Yes, I had inside information about Nova's launch. Yes, I used that to our advantage. And yes, I specifically chose you to implement our response because your hiring was recent enough to provide plausible deniability. Emma appreciated his honesty, even as it confirmed her fears. So I was just a convenient pawn. Initially, Morgan admitted. But pawns can become queens, Emma. Your execution of the strategy exceeded even my expectations. The payment for your excellence is my genuine respect, something very few people earn. He leaned forward, his expression intensely serious. Business at this level isn't about playing fair, it's about winning while appearing to play fair. Jeffrey Nova would do the same to us in a heartbeat. In fact, he has. Patricia Chen, Emma said softly. Morgan's eyes narrowed. He contacted you. He did. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Morgan nodded slowly. Patricia was brilliant, like you. She was also idealistic. When she discovered that Nova had planted a spy in our R&D department, she wanted to go to the authorities. I convinced her that handling it internally would be better for everyone. What happened to her? Emma asked. She resigned. Last I heard, she was teaching at a university overseas. Morgan's tone made it clear that this was all he would say on the matter. So what happens now? Emma asked. Now that I know the truth. That depends on you, Morgan replied. The payment for knowledge is choice. You can walk away, as Patricia did. Your reputation is still intact, you'd find another position easily. Or you can stay and learn how the game is really played at this level. Emma thought about everything that had happened since that rainy day, the opportunities she'd been given, the respect she'd earned, the financial security that had allowed her to move her mother to a better care facility. Was she willing to compromise certain principles to continue this trajectory? If I stay, she said carefully, I need to know that there are lines we won't cross. I won't be part of anything that could harm people. Morgan seemed to consider this. Business isn't black and white, Emma. But I can promise you this, everything I do is to secure Horizon's future against competitors who wouldn't hesitate to destroy us. I protect my people. Emma made her decision. Then I'll stay. But I'll be watching those lines carefully. Morgan stood, extending his hand. I would expect nothing less. The payment for my continued mentorship is your continued honesty, even when it's uncomfortable for me to hear. As they shook hands, Emma felt the weight of her choice. She had entered a world more complex and morally ambiguous than she had imagined on that rainy morning when she walked miles for a job interview. The payment for her ambition would be navigating these gray areas while holding on to her core principles. What she couldn't know then was that Jeffrey Nova's interest in her was far from casual. In his office across town, he was reviewing a file on Emma Carter that included details about her life that even Richard Morgan didn't know, details that could change everything if they came to light. The game between Horizon and Nova was entering a new phase, with Emma unwittingly positioned as a key piece on the board. The payment for her rapid rise would be becoming entangled in a corporate rivalry that had begun long before she entered the picture, a rivalry that was about to become dangerously personal. As Emma left the office that night, her phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. Patricia Chen sends her regards. When you're ready to learn the whole truth, call this number. Emma stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. For now, she had made her choice. But the seed of doubt had been planted, a seed that would grow in the coming months, as the conflict between Morgan and Nova escalated, pulling Emma deeper into their decades-old vendetta. The payment for her loyalty to Morgan would be tested again and again, as the lines he promised not to cross began to blur. And the question that would haunt her most was whether the mud that had once covered her clothes had been replaced by a different kind of stain, one that might never wash away. 6 months passed since Emma's fateful decision to remain at Horizon Industries. Her star continued to rise as she led the marketing department to unprecedented success. The accelerated product launch had exceeded all projections, cementing Emma's reputation as Richard Morgan's most valuable PROTG. Yet beneath the professional triumph, the deleted text about Patricia Chen haunted her thoughts. Late one evening, as rain lashed against her office windows reminiscent of the storm that had changed her life, Emma found herself alone with a decision. She had discovered an unmarked envelope on her desk containing a flash drive and a handwritten note, the truth about Richard Morgan and Gerald Nova. The payment for ignorance is becoming what you once despised. P.C. Emma's fingers hovered over the flash drive. Opening it meant there was no turning back. She thought about how far she had come, the comfortable apartment she now owned, her mother receiving the best medical care available, the respect she commanded when she walked into a room. All of it tied to the path she had chosen at Horizon. With a deep breath, she inserted the drive into her computer. The files contained correspondence dating back 15 years, methodically documenting the feud between the Nova and Morgan families. What began as Richard's personal vendetta had evolved into something far more sinister than corporate rivalry. Evidence of blackmail, digital sabotage, and deliberate character assassination campaigns unfolded before her eyes. Most disturbing was a folder labeled Potential Assets, containing detailed profiles of promising executives and engineers from competing companies whom Morgan had systematically recruited, used, and in some cases, discarded when they questioned his methods. Emma's own name appeared in a recent entry, alongside a disturbingly thorough dossier on her life, including details about her mother's medical condition that Emma had never shared with anyone at Horizon. Her hands trembled as she continued reading. The final document was a comprehensive plan to force a merger with Nova Tech, not through negotiation, but through a carefully orchestrated financial crisis that would leave Jeffrey Nova no choice but to sell. If successful, hundreds of Nova employees would lose their jobs, while key executives would face carefully constructed evidence of financial impropriety. Emma closed the files, feeling physically ill. The payment for her success had been becoming complicit in a vendetta she hadn't fully understood until now. She removed the drive and slipped it into her pocket just as her office door opened. Richard Morgan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Working late again, Emma?" "Just finishing some projections for next quarter," she replied, maintaining her composure despite her racing heart. Morgan entered, closing the door behind him. "Actually, I came to share some excellent news. The board has approved my recommendation. As of next month, you'll be promoted to Executive Vice President, the youngest in Horizon's history." Emma felt the payment for exceptional talent should be exceptional opportunity, Morgan said, studying her closely. "You've more than proven yourself these past months." He paused, gaze shifting briefly to her computer. "Unless, of course, something has changed your commitment to Horizon's future." The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Emma realized with sudden clarity that Morgan knew about the drive, perhaps had even arranged for its delivery himself, as a final test of her loyalty. "Nothing has changed," Emma said carefully. "I'm as committed to Horizon's success as ever." Morgan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Excellent. There's a board dinner tomorrow evening to announce your promotion. 7 o'clock at the Pinnacle. Don't be late. After he left, Emma sat motionless, listening to the rain. The parallel to her interview day was not lost on her once again. She faced a crucial choice about her future, with imperfect information and difficult circumstances. This time, however, she knew exactly what she needed to do. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office earlier than usual. By noon, she had downloaded and encrypted specific files from Horizon's servers, evidence that would corroborate what Patricia Chen had provided. At 2 p.m., she left the building for what she claimed was a doctor's appointment. Instead, she drove to a quiet cafe across town where Jeffrey Nova was waiting. "I was beginning to think you'd never call," he said as she slid into the booth across from him. Emma placed a flash drive on the table. "Everything you need to know about Richard Morgan's plans for Nova Tech." Nova raised an eyebrow. "And what payment do you expect for this betrayal?" "3 conditions," Emma replied without hesitation. "First, complete immunity for myself and protection for my mother. Second, when you use this information, and it's handled legally and ethically. No personal vendettas, no collateral damage to innocent employees at either company. And third." Nova asked, intrigued. "Patricia Chen receives a formal apology and compensation for whatever Morgan did to force her out." Nova studied her with new respect. "You're nothing like Richard's previous PROTGS. That's why I'm sitting here," Emma said. "The payment for talent shouldn't be compromising one's integrity." Nova pocketed the drive. "We have a deal, Miss Carter. Though I'm curious, what will you do now? Your career at Horizon is effectively over." Emma smiled for the first time. "I have other plans." That evening, when another journalist asked if she had any regrets about leaving Horizon just as her career there was taking off, Emma smiled. "The most valuable payment isn't money or power," she said. "It's being able to look in the mirror every morning and recognize the person looking back at you." As Phoenix Dynamics flourished in the years that followed, Emma's story became legend in business circles, not just for her dramatic rise from a mud-covered job candidate to corporate whistleblower to successful CEO, but for the reminder that true success demands more than just professional achievement. Industry analysts would later point to Emma's ethical stance as the catalyst for widespread reforms in corporate governance throughout the tech sector. The payment for her courage extended far beyond her personal vindication. It transformed how an entire industry operated. Jeffrey Nova, true to his word, had used the information Emma provided to protect his company while avoiding unnecessary damage to Horizon's rank and file employees. The resulting settlement included extensive funding for retraining programs for affected workers and a corporate ethics oversight committee that became a model for the industry. 5 years after that rainy interview day, Emma stood at the podium accepting the prestigious Ethics in Leadership Award. As she surveyed the audience, which included her mother, now healthy and beaming with pride, she thought about the long, complicated path that had led her here. "People often ask me what I learned from my experiences," she began her acceptance speech. "The truth is simple: circumstances may determine where your journey begins, but integrity determines where it leads. The payment for staying true to your values may sometimes feel like sacrifice, but it ultimately delivers the only success worth having." In the back of the ballroom, an older Richard Morgan watched quietly. After serving his community service sentence and paying substantial fines, he had retreated from public life. Tonight was his first industry appearance since his downfall. As Emma concluded her speech to thunderous applause, Morgan made his way toward the exit. She caught sight of him just before he reached the door and gave him a small, acknowledging nod. Not forgiveness, exactly, but recognition of the complicated role he had played in her story. The payment for Morgan's ambition had been the loss of his company and reputation. The payment for Emma's principles had been the chance to reshape an industry. Both had started with nothing and achieved remarkable success, but only one had managed to keep their soul intact along the way. Outside the venue, rain began to fall gently, a poetic reminder of how this story began. As Emma left the gala surrounded by her Phoenix team, she paused to let the drops fall on her upturned face, no longer afraid of getting a little mud on her shoes. After all, sometimes the messiest beginnings lead to the most beautiful destinations. The ultimate payment for perseverance through adversity isn't just success, it's becoming the kind of person who deserves it. Thanks for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that reminds us success isn't just about where we end up, but how we get there. Remember that sometimes, showing up covered in mud might just be the beginning of your greatest chapter.